Hi, everybody. Ken here. I have an audio.
You're good to go, Ken.
All right, there we go. Hi, everybody. Ken Croak here and Coca Sexton. We're really excited today. Beyond cold calling, bridging social selling with inside sales for winning strategy. We've got a fun little video we want to start off with, and then we'll jump right into the agenda and get rolling. Here it is.
Henry decided that he wanted to win Le Mans. He set his sights on the most prestigious race, certainly in Europe at that particular time.
On 65, we struck out again, the little Ferrari taxi cabs were there after midnight, and all day long the next day we were sitting on the sideline, so we had to eat crow again.
Wow, that thing is pretty cool. What do you think, Coca? It's good to have you here.
Yeah, that was a really good video, and thank you for having me, Ken.
You betcha. It's been a while. We've been, golly, we were down at the Sales Hacker Conference a few months ago. It was great to share the stage with you. I was still recovering from this crazy accident, and you and Jill and Jamie and you guys were pretty kind to me. Appreciate the opportunity. So we've been talking about this for a long time, and we decided that we would pull together social selling and inside sales and really talk about how those two have some great synergy. So let's talk just for a minute how it's going to work today. Webinar is going to be about an hour. If you have questions along the way, type them in the Q&A box as you think of them. And remember the hashtag Inside Sales Webinar. And, of course, this is being recorded. And also, you'll be able to download the slides. That's one of our top questions. In this sidebar there, you'll be able to download several things along the way. Before we got started, we wanted to do a quick poll, so this will be fun. The very first question is, how many hours per week are you using LinkedIn to prospect? So choose one of those. We'll give it just a moment here.
Be honest, everyone. We want to know.
All right. We've had 468 submit so far, 44%. Let's give it just another minute. 674, it's climbing, over half. We've got 3,300 registered today, don't we, Coca?
Yeah, and
that's a good-sized little gathering.
That was a nice little gathering. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day for this.
Okay, we're at 75%. We'll give it another 10, 20 seconds. We're just topping 80%. Good job, everybody. All right. There we go. Okay, let's see here. We just topped 82%. 76% spend 1 to 10 hours a week. 16% 11 to 20. Boy, this is cool. All right. Okay, let's go to the next question. Go ahead. Here we go. Next question, everybody. How many hours per week are you using the phone to prospect in your sales process? Oh, we've added more people to the call already. There's been about 100 more people come on just since the last question.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. Okay, we're 75%. This is going fast. Give you another little bit here. 76. Come on, let's top 80. 77. Okay, we just topped 80%. 26, 15, 5.5. Interesting. Okay. A rough comparison. We'll get final numbers a little bit later. It looks like 76%, back to LinkedIn question, 76% use 1 to 10 hours, 16% 11 to 20, 5% roughly 21 to 30, and just under 1% 31 to 40, and 1% about 40. On the phone, 51% 1 to 10, 26% 11 to 20, 15% 21 to 30, and 5.5, 5.4, over 31. Wow, boy, you folks are hitting the phone a lot. And 2% over 40. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So it sounds like we've got the two tools of choice here for this gathering at least. Let's jump into the agenda, everybody. Okay, so we're going to start off today talking about the state of the cold call and how things have been changing with inside sales and the big move forward with social selling, some of the gaps that have arisen, how we can bridge those, and some takeaways. Make sure you've got some really valuable content to start your day off today, making some sales. So let's jump right in. The state of the cold call. And Coca, let you and I have some fun with this here. This was, I remember this was such a funny thing. We had a seminar scheduled years ago with Ralph Van Sosen. Now, he's not with you guys any longer, is he?
No, he's moved on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, I don't know if there is anything bigger and better than LinkedIn, but but we had promised. Yeah, that's true. We promised we would do a webinar. I remember the very first title we like to use keywords, and we said how to cold call with LinkedIn or something like that, and immediately we got a blogger out of the UK say, "Hey, you guys are idiots. You should know you don't cold call with LinkedIn." And we thought, well, yeah, that's probably true. And I got a call from Ralph. He said, "Ken, what are you doing?" And we said, well, you know, obviously we searched our keywords and the phrase cold calling was still really hot. It was 5 times better than prospecting. And so we used that pretty much to stir the pot and get things rolling. But of course we're not cold calling using LinkedIn. That's the whole point of LinkedIn. It's to warm up the call, start with that member relationship. Do you remember this controversy that raged for about a month, Coca?
I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember the conversations internally, but I mean, I think the intent was always there, and I mean, I think that's, you know, I feel like that's why this built into such a conversation, and all the content that kind of flowed from it was this whole idea that, even though people are hitting the phones, LinkedIn is basically eliminated a lot of that legwork because of the network that's been built.
Absolutely. I remember it was funny. I called out that blogger. I said, I'll bet you haven't sold a thing in your life. And we invited them to come on and defend themselves. And I said, Ralph, why don't you come on the call with us? And why don't we do this webinar together? And we changed the title. We wrote a Forbes article about it. We called it Cold Calling is Dead Thanks to LinkedIn. And it was one of the biggest webinars we ever did. And then this ebook went crazy. It went nuts. So it's been a lot of fun to see the world has changed, and cold calling definitely is dead thanks to LinkedIn, especially if you're, now, a lot of folks still use the phrase cold calling, but what they really mean is prospecting and reaching out to people for business, I think. And I don't know that anybody who's actually cold calling, and by that I mean starting it with no information, absolutely cold. By the way, the article was #1 on Forbes. The thing went crazy, and we had a blast with it. A lot of fun. But what I wanted to do is jump into the evolution of inside sales right at first here. And Coca, feel free to throw in any ideas or interrupt me, because that's what makes this fun. But I wanted to start from a conversation. Dave Elkington, we're the two founders of Inside Sales. We started this back in 2004 at Bajío's, which is a little restaurant here in town. I still remember we had shrimp tacos, and I pulled out a napkin. This was the proverbial on the back of a napkin conversation. The first time I'd really met Dave Elkington, and we talked about some amazing things I had learned at Franklin Covey, where I came from, when I started the original Inside Sales department there back in the early 90s. And I don't know how, I go back a little further than you, Coca. You're a young buck, but back in the early days, they would teach seminars on how to prospect, where you would send a letter to somebody. And the letter would be sort of here's who I am, here's what I'm doing. I'd like to follow up with a phone call in a couple of days. I don't know if you've even heard of that, Coca, but it was called a mail call campaign. And one of the coolest things is, like, you'd find an article about somebody or a mention in the news, and you'd clip it out and mail it to them with a little letter, and then you'd follow up with a phone call. Well, I was telling Dave that we actually used that originally at Franklin Covey, but then we found something really cool. This was the coolest technology back in the early 90s. It was the fax machine. In fact, it was called faxing software. Intel had a program called Faxability, and we took the same thing where we would call first, send them a fax, and then follow up with a call back, and our appointments started going through the roof. So this was the first thing I told Dave. Was I said, we call it cadence, and it was using multiple forms of media. And we broke our sales process up into setters and closers. So specialization was the first real push. In fact, it was fun. I went back into the archives, and I found this slide deck from 2004. We called this methodology impression marketing, and it's the leverage of multiple forms of media all rolled together in a contact cadence. And I pulled this thing out. I was going through it, and we were talking cadence clear back in the early 90s. And we were using the fax machine, believe it or not. Now, people say, Ken, you're crazy. But I just checked with Franklin Covey a couple of years ago, and the fax is still outpulling an email 8-to-1. I thought, holy moly. When's the last time you got a fax you didn't read, Coca? When's the last time you even got a fax?
Yeah, I was going to say, when's the last time I got a fax?
But think about it. If you got, it would be unique, wouldn't it? And you'd probably look at it. When's the last time you got an email you didn't even open?
This morning. But that's the other.
Yep.
What I'm impressed with is, back when, you were discussing like this cadence idea, and this whole conversation that we're about to have is really about how technology has changed the game for sales. And even back in the early 90s when you were doing this, the fax machine was this new innovation into the business world, and that you were already on top of that. That's amazing.
Well, and I've said this, I'm going to say it again loud and clear. I believe that LinkedIn is the most powerful media the sales world has ever known, because it self-maintains, it's got relationship, it's got all kinds of nuances. We're going to talk about it, but I want to talk about how we could even apply this same playbook that was back in the early 90s. So I'm going to walk you guys through the story really quickly, and you're going to see how relevant it is today. This is going to be really powerful. So for us, at that lunch meeting at Bajío's, it all started with making calls. And what Dave and I brainstormed that day was the ability to use dialer technology and specialization and cadence. And what we were able to do in the green there, our goal was to fourfold the productivity of salespeople. And that's what, almost out of the gate, that's what happened. We said, folks, make more calls. Now this was, oh my gosh, this was 12 years ago. And sure enough, that's what happened. We introduced the concept of setters, then closers, and specialization. We immediately saw fourfold increases. Now, this was for small business. This was for high volume transactional calls, and it started happening. Of course, you don't make that many calls if you're in the enterprise or larger, more relationship-based organizations. But there was a really interesting new idea that came about as a result. One day I was talking to my reps, and I said, okay, you fourfolded your calls and your contacts, but what's your contact ratio? And they were making about 10%, 10 or 11% of the people they called would actually get on the call. And so I said, wait a minute. You mean that 90% of the calls you make, you're wasting your time? And they said, yeah. It either goes to voicemail or it goes to a receptionist. I thought, wow, that's a lot of wasted time. So this crazy idea came up. I was wondering, could we progress the call on every call? Could we progress the sale, rather, on every call? So in other words, the people that didn't answer the phone, could I at least progress the sale with either voicemail or talking to receptionists? And that's when the idea came that we used it at Franklin Covey. We were the second fastest growing company in the United States back in 1994, and the #1 training company in the world. And the idea I'm about to share was one of the coolest things we ever thought of. They still use some of it today. And here's basically what we did. So when we didn't get to a decision maker, we said to the receptionist, hey, could I send some information and then follow up a little bit later? And would you make sure they get it? And they would say, sure. And I'd say, what's the fax number closest to your desk? And I would send an invitation to preview a half-day or a full-day seminar about Franklin Covey. And they even got the time management day planner and everything involved. Well, this thing started working, and it started working like crazy. We called it the call, fax, call method. And I started running the numbers, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is killing it. I didn't have any content back then, Coca, so I walked down the hallway, and I found the marketing department, and they had all these cool brochures. I grabbed a copy of every one. I went and scanned them black and white, and I put them as a fax, and we started faxing these things out. But a little while later, I went back, and I was only getting a 1% response. And I went to Ed Barham, the vice president of marketing, and I told this story to Dave Elkington. He was so excited. I said, Ed, I'm only getting 1% with those mailers that you have. What can I do to do better? He said, 1%. What do you mean 1%? How did you get 1%? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I just faxed them out. And he said, we're only getting 0.2%, Ken, and we're spending $3 million a quarter on those things. They cost 70 cents a piece to print and mail. They take 5 to 7 days to hit, and we're getting 0.2 to 0.3%. And I thought, wait a minute. I'm getting 1%, 5 times the result. It takes 5 minutes to send it through a fax, and I'm getting about half the people I talk to at the receptionist desk to give me a fax number. So I just for fun, I decided to do a contest. I challenged my entire department, and I said, I will make more sales than you today, and I will never speak to a decision maker. In fact, if they answer, I'll hang up. They said, Ken, you're crazy. I said, yep. I said, but the loser has to dance the hula in front of the entire lunchroom at Franklin Covey. And they said, okay, we're in. So we buckled ourselves in. This was the craziest day I ever had. We brought lunch right to our desk, and I dialed for 7 hours and 45 minutes, and I totally cheated. All I did was call receptionists and ask for fax numbers. And this was dialing by hand, Coca. I made 460 calls. I sent 298 faxes with that faxing software right from my desk, and that day I made 11 sales. And I never spoke to a decision maker. Well, the problem was the sales came in over the course of a week, but I made 11 sales. My best salesperson made 7. The average was 2. I made 11 and never spoke to anybody that could buy from me. And you know what was funny is 6 weeks later, I sent the same faxes. Yeah, it was crazy. I sent the same faxes to the same people. I made 8 more sales. And that's when I realized the power of marketing coupled with the phone might be more powerful than anything else we do. And that's what we can do today with LinkedIn. So here's sort of a summary of what we've learned. We call it the Call Fax Call campaign. And here's what was cool. I had gathered thousands of fax numbers. Next month, I could send them again with messaging. In fact, we started sending every month. We started testing different kinds of content. And we started out at 1%, and we learned some methodologies that I'll be sharing in some later training. We got it up to 3.5% as a byproduct of our wasted time. Now, most people may not have read this cool book by Seth Godin. But he was the one who really came up with this concept of what we call permission marketing. When we would get on the phone, we would ask them if we could send this information and follow up, and they always said yes. I think it was just to get us off the call. But we invented a proactive version of permission marketing where we used it as a byproduct of the phone call. By telling this story to Dave Elkington, this is what got him excited enough to start this crazy business, InsideSales.com. Back in 2004, 2005. But I have to tell you about a sales rep we had at Franklin. His name was Steve Tate. He was in our top 3 salespeople out of 70 that we had. And he was very disciplined about this proactive fax number gathering. And over the course of 3 years, he gathered 20,000 fax numbers, which meant with the click of a button, he could send out 20,000 faxes. Now, he could do that every month. So at a 1%, that means he himself, without any help from marketing, could generate 200 leads. That's the power of this media impression coupled with the phone. In fact, he could fill up half the seats in the seminars he was in charge of with never making a phone call. That's sort of this convergence of sales and marketing. Some call it smarketing. But there's some horsepower there if we'll learn these skills. So let's talk about what I call the leverage of media impressions. Now, this is probably pretty low for LinkedIn, Coca. I remember when we tested an email versus just a message inside of LinkedIn, and we had a 7-fold increase in results from a LinkedIn message. Now, I know that the in-mail is way beyond that. Can you talk to that for just a minute, Coca, and tell us some of your background on the power of LinkedIn messaging?
Yeah, I mean, so, my history, when I started off in sales, I was my management, my leadership was very involved with the dialing for dollars strategy. We had a number of dials that we had to make in a day and a certain amount of talk time. And it still surprises me to this day when a sales team will say this is how they're still being measured, because it's so archaic. I hated making phone calls. No, I mean, I guess I hated making cold calls, where, marketing would throw a lead over the fence, and it would basically be a name, a title, and a phone number, and I'd have to dial it and see if this person would be interested in my product. So I started using, I was an early adopter into LinkedIn, and I started using LinkedIn as a way to communicate with people, mainly because my phone calls weren't being returned. Most of the time, even based on the data you were showing here, it was basically the same amount. 90% was never actually getting to the person. So I learned to leverage social media, LinkedIn specifically, on ways to communicate. And it was amazing, and it still is, in many ways, a great way to break through the noise. And we hear stories all the time from sales reps, entrepreneurs, business owners that have found that, sending an in-mail or sending some customized message to these buyers, these decision makers, actually gets a response when they had been trying to get these people through email or phone numerous times before, and with no luck. So in-mail, sending these messages when done correctly is an awesome tool for sales reps to be using.
Yeah, I was blown away. I remember a research study when in-mail was just hitting its stride. It was like 30 or 40 times the normal response rate. I couldn't believe it. And I remember in those days you'd even give them another one, if it didn't work. So then you couple this media impression with the new content posting capability of LinkedIn, where you're helping to educate the people and the whole world starts to change. But we coupled in another media, voice impressions, voicemail, and it happened again. So that's actually what I'm recommending, is that you start coupling the phone with your media impressions with a rich audio message from a voicemail, and we're getting 3 times the net result with the power of technology. But look at it compared to the original way here. In the early days of just doing things manually, we're seeing as much as a 12x increase with all of this rolling together. And that's the power that we really want to talk about today. So I'm going to turn the time over to you now, Coca, for a little bit. We'll jump back and forth on a few things later on. But the buyer has changed, and Coca, take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story, Ken. I don't know, in all the years that I've known you, I don't think I've ever heard that story from you. It's fascinating.
That's the original, and that's what got us off. And we still see those kinds of numbers when we start. But it's never had this richness with LinkedIn and social and digital and the voice all rolling together like it does now. This is pretty exciting times.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think that that just kind of continues along that story of the evolution that sales has taken. And now we're in this digital age, and the buyer, these social buyers, the landscape has changed. Based on some research by Gartner, you'll hear stats like this coming from other analyst organizations. There's typically 5.4 buyers, influencers, in a buying decision. And, these as, the economic buyer or the actual user of the product or the manager of the team. There's more than one person that's involved in most of these B2B complex sales, because the opportunity size is a little bit larger, and the deal touches so many different parts of an organization in most cases that there's just multiple input points. 75% of these B2B buyers use social networks to be more informed on vendors. And this has been almost like where I almost started my platform years ago in this area of social selling, was that we knew that this was happening. We didn't have all the data to back it up yet. I was kind of going off of a gut, taking this intelligent risk. But I knew that as buyers were leveraging social media to make decisions, they were looking for references from their networks. They were talking to friends or peers about what products and services they were using to solve the business problems before they ever reached out to a company or wanted to talk to a salesperson, for sure. So having data that shows that more and more buyers are continuing to use social media as a way to become more informed and self-educate, I think that trend is continuing to rise, especially as technology continues to increase. And then 90% of decision makers say they never respond to cold outreach. And I'm part of that 90%. I go through my voicemail and I listen to the first 2 or 3 words, and I'll hit delete if I think it's somebody trying to pitch me something. And the same thing with email. Most decision makers, most buyers, most of these individuals that are making buying decisions, managers of teams, they are getting inundated with these emails and these phone calls. So it's really just a quick listen and then a delete of most of these communications, unless you're able to do something that breaks through the noise. And the benefit that I had when I was in sales and kind of had this foresight on where social media was going was that I started trying to leverage social media as a way to break through that noise of dialing for dollars and sending emails that never had a response. So to set the base for the foundation for what social selling is, what I want to do is at least lay the groundwork for how we define it here. And the way that we look at social selling here at LinkedIn is, it measures your performance against 4 essential elements: creating your professional brand, finding the right people, engaging with insights, and building relationships. And the order of these is very specific. We didn't just jumble this together with a bunch of ideas. I truly believe, and based on the data that we have and the experience that I've had working with sales teams all over the world, it starts with your professional brand. If you as a sales professional do not have a polished reputation online, so meaning if somebody were to search for you, if somebody were to pull up your LinkedIn profile and you didn't look legitimate, if you didn't look like somebody that they could trust, none of this other work that you were going to do was going to matter. So finding the right people. Who are these decision makers? Who are the people in these companies that you want to do business with? And then engaging them with insights. So it's not just, hey, my name is John and I'm trying to sell you a product or service. It's, hey, my name is John. Here's something I know about your industry that may be impacting you. Here's something that I understand, about your specific business that you're running. It could be it's something, a little bit more lightweight as, hey, you and I went to the same school. But either way, you're leveraging insights to start building that relationship. And ultimately, that's what we want to do as sales professionals. Most B2B sales professionals are not transactional salespeople. They're looking to build ongoing relationships so that these people are customers and advocates in many ways for years to come. So as we did some research, I believe this was about last year, 2014, a couple years ago, that we did some research with the IDC because we wanted to understand how buyers were leveraging social media. We had a lot of ideas around this. We had a lot of hypotheses about how buyers were using social media, but we wanted to actually get the research. So we went off on this fact-finding mission, and this is a subset of what we had found. What we had found was that compared to other B2B buyers, the people who were not leveraging social media, the buyers who use social media for purchasing spent 84% more per purchase. And this one stat alone astounded me because most of the misconceptions were that people were using social media as buyers to always look for the discount. And I think that may be true in a B2C environment because you're looking for the coupons, you're looking for the discount codes, you're looking for the deal of the day. But in a B2B context, buyers aren't as interested in the deal of the day. They want to make sure that they are buying the right product or service to fill a gap within their business. And if they find, based on their own research, that product or service that's going to fill the gap and help their company, they're actually willing to spend more. And they do it without thinking twice because they feel confident that the decision they're making is helping their company. So if it costs a little bit of extra money, it's worth it. We also found that social buyers make 61% more purchases than average than the buyers who don't use social. So not only are these social buyers, the people who are using social media during buying decisions, spending more money, they're spending more money more often. So the idea that people are fighting over specific budgets seems to go away also. the individuals who are doing these, exhibiting these buying behaviors and are out looking for products or services to fill a gap, they're looking for the right product to fill the gap, and they're willing to buy more stuff because they realize that they're intelligent about what they're purchasing, so they're trying to fill as many gaps in their business as possible with products or services that they can research online. And Ken, you had brought this up, where sales and marketing start colliding, the idea of smarketing, where these sales professionals really can make the biggest impact and partner more effectively with these social buyers to find ways to actually break through the noise and build relationships with people who are leveraging social media as a buyer, falls within one of three buckets. First, it's social proximity. So how are you building your networks thoughtfully in a way to put yourself as close as possible to those decision makers? Going back to your example that you had earlier, Ken, this is fascinating. It started with phone calls, then you'd send a fax, and then you'd get another phone call. So you were leveraging different technologies, the phone and fax, to get as close as possible to that buyer. Now, with the onset of social media, with social networks like LinkedIn, your proximity, you have a global reach, and you're able to put yourself that much closer very quickly with these decision makers. Then it's the social presence. So going back to your professional identity, how are you presenting yourself online so that you are looked at as a subject matter expert in your area? Are you credible and authentic? Are you sharing information that is valuable to these buyers, that's helping them make better decisions? If you're doing all of that correctly, you start building social capital. And what social capital is finding ways to continue to build that relationship, because most buyers maybe not be ready to buy something right this minute. They're starting down this path of research to look for a product or a service to fill a business need. If you are close to them by proximity, you have a professional and authentic presence online, and you're sharing information and you're educating these buyers by providing that education, you're building social capital. So that when that buyer is ready to pull the trigger, is ready to say, you know what, it's time to spend the money and buy this product or service, you're going to be the first person they think of because you've already built all the social capital and they already trust you.
Coca, could I jump in for just a second?
Absolutely.
I had a really cool research study I was made aware of just about a month ago from a friend of mine, Jonathan Johnson. He's the CEO of the More Good Foundation. And they were researching this social capital, this social credibility concept. And there was a research study where they asked buyers and they said, okay, now this was B2C, some B2B, but mostly B2C. And they said, okay, what kind of content do you trust to make a purchase decision? And they found that only 14% actually trust highly produced content, meaning the stuff that obviously comes from a sales department or a marketing department. But here's this, 92% of the people trust content that comes to them through the social channel, through either content from social, from a blog that's been peer-reviewed, a review base on a book, for example. That's massive. 14% trust highly produced content. 92% trust social-based content. It blew me away.
Yeah, those are astounding numbers, and I'm not surprised by it. And I have my own hypothesis around this as well. Is that most sales professionals on this call, the 1,000+ people that are actually attending this right now, you already understand that people buy from people. This has been beat into us as sales professionals since probably the day we started our first job. People buy from people. And we continue to find that even though a brand has reach and a brand has some type of authentic value based on it that you trust or you don't trust because you don't know them, that as people buy from people, the individuals within that company are actually moving the needle, not so much the brand. And that as the brand shares things, that may be really good for awareness. You may generate some downstream metrics from that. But we find that as the sales professionals themselves become more advanced in sharing the information, that their networks, the people that are seeing that these other people are sharing the information, it starts adding value. And I think that the study that you just mentioned, speaks directly to that. So why is social selling important? Inherently, I'm very biased, and I believe that social selling is the end-all be-all. But then again, I'm biased. What we wanted to do is figure out what actually matters and what can we measure. So I'll give a quick overview of what the social selling index is. And if you're looking at the slide, you see SSI leaders. So we call it the SSI. The social selling index is LinkedIn's methodology for measuring the impact or the benefit to a sales professional on how they're using the LinkedIn network. And it goes across a bunch of variables within this algorithm, but it mainly goes back to our definition of leveraging your professional brand to fill your pipeline with the right people, insights, and relationships. So is your profile complete? Is your profile inviting to customers? Are you sharing information that is actually being engaged? So all these activities, all these behaviors come into the social selling index, and there'll be more information about how you can get your social selling index number later on in this webinar. If you're interested in that, I suggest that every sales professional know what their SSI number is. But what we found as we started going off and doing our own research based on individuals who have high social selling index scores, and a high SSI in our definition is 70 and above. It's a scale from 0 to 100. So from 70 and above, was there actually a difference in how they were performing as sales professionals? And what we found was very surprising to us. Social selling leaders created 45% more opportunities than the ones that were below 70. That means that the behavior they were exhibiting on LinkedIn as a platform was actually helping them become better sales professionals and create more opportunities because they were able to build these relationships outside of phone and email. We also found that these social selling index leaders within companies were 51% more likely to hit their quota than the laggards. I mean, these are amazing numbers. And it surprises me when sales professionals are like, oh, I don't need to use LinkedIn. I'm doing just fine. No, you're really not. And the people on your teams that are learning to leverage social selling, the way that we describe it, are going to surpass you fairly soon. And we're starting to see more and more of this as this kind of takes off and becomes more global. And going back to how you're sharing information, and are you actually engaging your network? If you've thoughtfully built your network and you're making connections with these buyers, these social buyers, it will actually benefit you as a sales professional if you're posting status updates, which is something that sales professionals aren't very familiar with or not very comfortable doing. But I'm going to give you some data here that might actually push you over the edge to start sharing a little bit more often. Sales reps that exceed quota engage with prospects, these buyers, 39% more than laggards. And by engaging with, I mean sending emails, commenting, liking, sharing the updates. All of you log into LinkedIn and you see a stream of updates from your connections. How hard is it for you to leave a quick comment, give them a thumbs up, reshare some interesting stuff that you find from your connections? These engagements, this stuff builds social capital within your social buyers, and you shouldn't overlook it. It actually has an impact on how you're doing business. We also found that sales reps that exceed their quota, not just meet it, the ones that are exceeding their quota, have their updates engaged 98% more than laggards. And what does this mean? This means that sales professionals that are practicing social selling are sharing information that is actually being consumed by these buyers and engaged at a higher rate, because you become the single point of reference for your network. Your network starts looking to you and looking for the next status update from you to learn something new. So if you haven't been sharing on a regular basis on social networks like LinkedIn, you should be doing it, because it will have an impact on how well you do as a sales professional on meeting your quota, filling your pipeline, and exceeding that quota. But that's not enough. You can share all day long. You can have the greatest profile that's polished. The one thing that keeps coming up time and time again, and in fact, this is where the crux of this conversation starts coming into with Ken and I, and this got brought up in the Sales Hacker event that we were attending, was how do you move from online to offline? Because you can build very strong relationships online. In fact, there's a lot of people out there that will be more than happy to tell you that there is a return on relationships. And I don't believe that. Because as sales professionals, there's no ROI on making friends. Yeah, you can make a lot of friends, but at the end of the day, you're trying to become a better salesperson. You're trying to actually fill your pipeline and close deals. And rarely does that happen in solely a virtual environment. You have to find ways, you have to have a methodology to go from online to offline. And by offline, I mean actually getting them on a phone so you can actually talk to them and hear their voice, or even better yet, schedule a meeting where you can actually see them face to face. And I think that's where Ken and I are going to start building the synergy based on what he had mentioned before about how he was leveraging phone and fax to do these things, and what I just talked about, why social selling is so important and is changing the game for how sales professionals are becoming successful, is moving from online to offline. And let's go into this, Ken.
Great.
So
perfect. I was thinking while you were talking, Coca, that the problem is typically people think they're, that we're pigeonholed into a certain expertise that we're good at. We're good at the phone, or we're good at LinkedIn or whatever. But the holistic approach tends to bridge to more assertive media. And here's what I mean by that. So we start off with perhaps really passive media like Twitter, for example, and then social. LinkedIn is definitely the most assertive of the social media. And then as we start moving to digital media where people download the content and email, then what I call virtual media. I was keynoting in Rome for Cisco, and they had changed the name of their inside sales department to virtual sales department, which is great. But virtual is where you're actually simulating the face-to-face model, and the richest of all is still live media. It's going face-to-face. What we're doing today is a simulation of face-to-face. And Coca and I are in different parts of California. I'm in San Diego right now, but we're interacting together with thousands of you. And what I've learned is that the way to make sales and build business relationships over time is to continually bridge to more assertive media. So we would start conversations with social. That's where we would build awareness. That's where we would profile our accounts, build our brand. And it's much easier to start those conversations. But then people usually want content. They want to learn. They want to be educated. That's where digital comes in. And then a live conversation is really where it starts to take off. And I remember flying on an airplane, United, and I read this article on United Travel Services, and this was phenomenal. They had an inside sales department and an outside sales department, and they were quoting the numbers. They had a 40% close rate for outside sales, and at the time they had a 16% close rate for inside sales. That's 2.5 times higher close rate getting face-to-face. But here's what was amazing. The inside people spoke to 7 times more people. and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. But what if we could bridge them together? What if we could combine inside, outside, social, digital, and make this the full process? And that's when I started seeing the big picture. Because one of the newest forms of selling is a hybrid model. And that's where you spend a lot of your time in social, digital, and virtual environments. but then you go live when you can. In fact, I think it was the crash 2008 when this really came into its own because people stopped traveling. I remember those days. And all of a sudden, the travel budgets disappeared. And people used to go face-to-face 4.5 or 5 times, but now they go face-to-face 1.5 to 2 times, and they do the rest remotely. And I think that's the best solution of all. So it's man plus machine. You know, we love the Iron Man metaphor and Iron Woman metaphor, and we are encased in technology if we're really using these tools, but it's still a human being inside. And the specialization model is still really, really powerful. It's more powerful than ever. There's some real problems, though, in moving from these different media. The biggest problem is if you drop the baton. Now, that can just be people who don't follow up, but that's not quite what I mean. There's a rich data model that has to be handed off as well, and maybe we can talk this for a minute, Coca. I know that the whole point of LinkedIn is that amazing information in the LinkedIn profile and the relationships that you have with these people. And what I've learned is you've got to capture that and let that be the very first place you start when you start the phone conversation. One of my best examples is if you go to the mall and you run up to one of these shoe stores, you know, and you run up to the front and you walk in the front door and someone runs up to you and they say, "May I help you?" And you say, "No, I'm just looking." Even though you're there to look for shoes. They use that verbiage that triggers this response, and that's what a rookie salesperson does. But then if you go to Nordstrom's or one of these really nice places where you buy a suit, when you walk in, they don't run up to you. They watch where you go. They watch the trail. You might walk over to the tie rack or to the shoe department, and then they come up and they've pretty much sized you up. They know what size you're going to wear. I always wish they didn't know what size I wear because it's too big. But this professional sees the breadcrumb trail that you leave. They see the context that you begin, and then they start the conversation with that. And that's what I'm talking about. You've got to learn context and have alignment with the conversations that began in social. It would be nice to know the content that they downloaded at the digital stage so that when you move to virtual, you have context. I call it alignment. And are you much of an archer, Coca? You ever shot a bow and arrow?
I have shot a bow and arrow. I wouldn't consider myself an archer, but I do enjoy shooting an arrow from time to time.
Yeah, it's a little bit fun, and there's a science to it. There's alignment. When you pull that string back, your eye is right there in alignment, looking through the sights to the target. Well, each of those pieces is part of the equation. You know, the social is first. You've got to have a rich review of the conversation, who this person is, before you engage on the phone. And frankly, the same thing even if you go live. So you know, there's a big rage right now with cadence, but I think context is far more important even than cadence. In other words, start the conversation at the next level of media where you left off with the previous level of media. And that's where magic things start to happen. So here's some questions to ask around alignment. Who are you connected with? How are you connected? What conversations have been had in the past? That's where you want to start when you start bridging over to the virtual or the live sales environment. Where did you hear about this person? What lead sources from the digital world? What offers have they already partaken of? What content have they seen? What events have they been to? So we're making a call for a much richer experience when these salespeople start bridging the social to digital to virtual environment so that sales become far more of a real world experience where there's trust, where there's alignment, where you understand how educated the prospect is. So I'm talking your ear off, but anyway, this is sort of my new soapbox. I think context is key. Cadence is important, but the two work together to form alignment and authenticity. An authentic conversation, you don't have to use sales skills or manipulation. You just use education. You just see what they're interested in, and that's all they're going to buy anyway is what they want. So it's pretty powerful. Should we get into some takeaways and some review for a minute here, Coca?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna turn you loose here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, turn me loose. I'm fine with it. So, 4 things you should start doing with social selling. You need to prioritize your profile. And it surprises me. I mean, I think most sales professionals, especially the social ones, and I'm sure the ones that are on this webinar today, have a decent LinkedIn profile. Take a few minutes and look through it again. Make sure that it is customer focused. It's not about you, it's about them. Follow your key contacts and companies on LinkedIn Insights. So follow the companies that matter most to you as a sales professional. Understand how you're connected into that company and what connections are missing. Who should you be connected with at this company, and do some research on them and find a way to thoughtfully get connected. Look up and research prospects before you dial them. I hate it when people do this to me, where they'll get me on the phone. I'll actually answer my phone, and it'll be some sales professional that has no idea what I do, is trying to sell me leads when I'm like, I work at a company called LinkedIn. Did you even know that? Like, I don't need to buy lists from you. But you need to be able to do your research. You should know 3 to 5 things about that individual based on their social footprint that you can bring up into the phone conversation. The college, the alumni network is a dead ringer. If you happen to find people that you can get in contact with that went to the same college or university as you, that is a great opening, icebreaker. And then create a plan for building relationships and moving these from online to offline. I think that, as key takeaways go, if you could master these 4, you're going to be doing outstanding. And down
great.
The link, you can see the link for where you can get your social selling index score.
I did that, and it was profound. I would recommend everybody go get. It's a really cool summary of your social selling index, you guys. And I check in on mine every so often, and I would really recommend you do that. It's sort of a way to measure how well you're doing and what you can do better. All right, we've got a couple of housekeeping things, and I'm going to review. We've got some Q&A here. We want to invite everybody for the World's Largest Online Sales Summit, March 9th. This is the 4th one that we've done. We've broken the record several times. We're going to do it again. We're really excited. Please join us. And I understand that LinkedIn has an event going on as well. By the way, this one is the URL to register. And you've got a live webinar coming up. You want to talk about that real quick, Coca?
Yeah, so we have regular webinars. The next live webinar is February 24th at 11 a.m. And this is around the overview of our Sales Navigator product. We talk a lot about LinkedIn as a very horizontal application for sales professionals. Sales Navigator is the Ferrari of using LinkedIn, especially for salespeople. It allows you to get laser focused into the accounts and contacts that you're trying to do business with.
Awesome. All right, we've got some questions here. We're going to go a little bit longer than normal because, by the way, folks, we'll pull this together into an ebook, and we have found that this Q&A at the end adds some really good meat to the ebook. So we're gonna answer a few questions. So first one, this is to you, Coca. What is considered a good score on the social selling index?
100. I'm just kidding. 100 is perfect.
Yeah.
You should always strive for perfection. The way that we kind of balance it or measure it out, anything over 70 is you're an expert. You're doing extremely well. If you're in the 30 to 40 range, you only have to do a handful of things to actually bump that up pretty quickly. Once you get into like the 50, 60 range, it takes a little bit of work. it pays off in the end. Once you get up into the 70s, you actually start seeing some pretty impactful results in what you're doing. So you should strive to be above 70.
So to follow up to that same point, if you were coaching someone, Coca, on things to move really fast to improve their social selling index, what would be some of the things you'd recommend, and what usually gets overlooked? What do people forget to do?
Well, I think the very first thing, and I've said this a handful of times now, you have to fix your profiles. Your profile has to be a digital representation of your professional self. You want these buyers to see your profile and want to come back for more. And when you can achieve that, having a decent profile where it becomes a resource, you're on your way to greatness. Outside of that, I think that one of the things that most salespeople struggle with that has a really good impact on your social selling index score is leveraging insights and engaging with insights. So, are you sharing information? Are you engaging on the network with these buyers? Are you sending messages that are actually getting replied to? I think that is another aspect where I think salespeople tend to not do as much. That could actually have a big impact on your profession, on your career. And then behind that, it really comes down to who are you connecting with? Are you connecting with the right decision makers? I would guess that most sales professionals are. They usually focus on these buyers. But those are the things that really help you move the needle.
Gotcha. We're getting some questions about where do they find the link again for the SSI. Do you remember where we had that listed here?
Yeah, that was the resource library to the right of the slides.
There you go, guys. Resource library on the right. You'll have a link for the social selling index. So, question: define cadence. All right. Well, I'm going to take a stab at that, and then you can join me, Coca. Now I got a fun one for you. So, cadence are the multiple steps that you need to take to ensure contact and education of the prospect to progress the sale. So there's a lot of, again, in the early days, we started with a mail call campaign and then a call mail call campaign, then call fax call. Now there's call email call. There's call message call. And what Coca is espousing is starting with the research on LinkedIn, this 3x3 kind of prospect or process where you're researching. That should be part of your cadence. So it's using the different forms of media to ensure that you contact that decision maker and that you've educated them along the way. People don't realize one of the things I do with my voicemail is I put one chunk of information about what I'm offering, just one. I do the same thing in an email. And by the time, if I've run 6 to 9 cadence attempts, I have installed 6 to 9 chunks of information in that prospect's head that wouldn't otherwise have been there. And and by the time when I reach them, my overall conversion is going way up. So cadence is not just about contacting, it's about educating. Any thoughts on that, Coca?
No, and I think cadence is important, and you have to. It's about timing as well as the type of interaction that you have. I think that you should always look at the person's LinkedIn profile. You should look at their social footprint regardless of network. You should find out where this person is to get some context before you make the first phone call. I've seen success with some sales professionals that will look at the LinkedIn profile, will reach out and leave a voicemail on the individual's phone. They'll reference the fact that they're going to send them an email. So they'll say, John, calling out of the blue, leaving you a quick message. I'm going to send you an email. I'd like to connect with you on X, Y, and Z. And then they send a LinkedIn invite, and they say, I'm really interested in following, what you're doing in your industry. I'd like to be connected here. They're trying this multi-leveled approach to make sure that they're kind of breaking through the noise without trying to create too much more on their side.
Gotcha. Here's a question for you. What constitutes engagement? You mentioned that earlier. Take a minute on engagement.
So engagement is an overarching term for any type of interaction you may have. And what that means is, when you're engaging with somebody. So are you sending them messages? Are you giving their status updates a thumb up? Are you commenting on a thread they created within a group? Are you sharing the stuff that they're sharing? All of these things go into engagement. The same way that in an analog world, engagement is, meeting them for coffee or talking to them at an event. All of these things kind of boil up into engagement in an analog world. In a digital world, it transfers over fairly the same.
Another question. Many large leaders in large organizations still see LinkedIn as nothing more than a digital resume used for job search. What do we do to help old school sales leaders get on board with investing in social selling? Any ideas there? I've got a few, but I'll turn you loose, Coca.
Yeah, I think that, generationally, that's how it's been viewed. And it's still surprising to me that we still run into companies that feel this way. When we're talking to individual that I see, the sales professionals, maybe even some of the sales managers, the lower level managers, mid-management, they get it. They know that these things are helping move the needle. They may not be measuring it very effectively, but they know that it's helping. They understand that the world is going digital, and LinkedIn, being the professional network that it is, has the largest reach and potential. For the executive teams, the big decision makers in companies, this is one of the reasons why the Sales Solutions Group specifically went out and did all this research. The numbers don't lie. And if your executive team is hesitant or reluctant to jump on the social selling train, the numbers aren't going to, again, the numbers don't lie. Show them the data. Show them the research that's been done by us, by other analyst firms, the IDC, Forrester. It's so apparent now that leveraging social media within the buying and selling process is a game changer, and that counting number of dials and talk time should be the lowest thing on the list that you're measuring as an impact for your sales team.
So, question, this one is, how does InsideSales.com use social selling? There's three really fun plays, and Coca can probably talk to it, but let me just talk about one of the things we really recommend. And here's another question. Do you recommend connecting with prospective or current clients? Would that be overkill?
Absolutely.
Well, that's actually one of the
if
plays.
You're not
absolutely.
With your prospects or current customers, you're doing yourself a major disservice.
In fact, one of the cool plays that we run, you guys, is we do what's called a reverse customer referral. This is pretty cool. So when you're out there looking at prospects in their LinkedIn, see if they're connected to your clients, okay? And if you're connected with your clients, that's going to help a lot more. So make sure you know. And then when you're talking to them, say, oh, by the way, you're already connected with such and such and so and these folks. Did you realize that? They're all clients of ours. And boom, they've already got that built-in reference. And so that's a big one. My favorite is still the job alerts. I think that's just massive. The trigger events, Craig Alliance and others have talked about. Finding when a new vice president of sales changes jobs. That's massive, because we have found within about the first 90 days, that's when they make their new purchase decisions. They bring their friends with them. They bring their contracts with them. They're open to new ones at that period of time. But after about 90 days, they're done. And here's what's cool. The first question you ask when a new vice president takes over at a prospect company, you say, oh, by the way, who'd you replace? And they replaced the vice president that went somewhere else. So there's another lead. And then you say, oh, by the way, where'd you come from? And there's a third lead, because they left a hole at a position at a company that they just came from. So it's like a domino effect, and it just keeps increasing. Those job change alerts are really big. The other fun thing we love is job listings. If people are hiring, what does that mean? They've got money, they've got need. So the job listings in LinkedIn and in Monster and Career Builder and local classifieds, those are great ways. In fact, you can sign up as if you're looking for a job at the ideal company that you're trying to sell to, and every morning in your inbox you can have predefined leads of companies who just rolled out new job listings, meaning they're hiring and they're great prospects. Those are three plays that we love to run. Any ideas there, Coca?
No, I think you covered it all. I think that's it.
Okay. How do we, let's see. Here's a good one. Is there a way to track the usage of your reps? Can you, in other words, if people want to hold their reps a little bit more accountable, Coca, to seeing what they're doing out there, where do we stand with reporting inside of LinkedIn for that?
So there's a couple areas. Let me first touch on the Sales Navigator piece. So a sales team using the Sales Navigator platform, admins to that can see the usage. They can't see who you're connecting to specifically. They can't see member-specific data because, sales professionals don't necessarily need to be sharing all of that information with their management. But what they will be able to see is, are they connecting with decision makers, directors and above? Are they sending messages that are actually getting engagement? Those are some key indicators to how the reps are leveraging the platform. Outside of that, I think that it's very important for sales managers and marketing teams to get alignment on how this information is being tracked within your CRM. So do you have a lead source called social? You have one called events. You have a lead source for phone call. Why don't you have one for social? And when you make contact, when you start this process with a new buyer from a social media interaction and you are able to capture that, and you do it systematically through your organization, you can really start realizing where that revenue stream from social media is going to start coming from. There is an ROI to it.
Awesome. One last question. This one's for you, Coca. Do you have profile examples as to what we should be doing? I remember some great stuff, but that article you did was amazing on how to do a really good profile. Tell us about where to find that.
So you can go to my LinkedIn profile. Not that I want to say that I'm the best example out there, but I've tried to live by example. So my profile is pretty well polished up. Within my profile, I've written a couple long form posts around this. Most recently there was one about things that you should be doing with your like LinkedIn hacks, tricks for your LinkedIn profile. It's an infographic that goes through a whole bunch of stuff that a sales professional should be focused on. Ken's is great. You'll know it when you see it. When you see a great profile, because you'll want to keep coming back for more.
Awesome. Okay, we got one last thing we want everyone to do who haven't left yet. Stay on. One last quick poll. Here we go. Why did you attend today's webinar? We'd love to hear the why, and we'd love to just see roughly, and mark all that apply, but go ahead and let's see how we're doing out here. Who's left? Still hang with us, guys. 723 still on the call. Here we go. Okay, it's ramping up fast now. 10%, 25%. Thanks, everybody. We thought this would be really fun to just say, why did you join us today? Remember, you can mark multiple. This is whatever was really interesting. Go ahead and check it. 43%, 48%. It's coming fast now. %. Good job, everybody. Thank you. This is helpful. All right. We're hitting 60%. Again, thanks, everybody. 400 people have marked it. All right, I'm going to leave that open, actually. And while that's still going, I just want to thank you, Coca. This was a lot of fun. Boy, it took us a while to pull this back together, but remember, bridging between social media and inside sales is really the key. Make sure you have that rich handoff. Follow those 4 reminders of Coca to get everything in place so that your social selling index skyrockets into productivity. We'll be doing this again hopefully soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, Coca.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you, Ken.